Welcome to BeFM Drama and the final episode in our adaptation of The Adventure of the Speckled Band, a classic Sherlock Holmes mystery. Holmes and Dr. Watson lie in wait at a country inn for a signal that will bring them to Stoke Moran, the crumbling manor house of the mad Dr. Roylott and his terrified stepdaughter Helen, who is seeking to avoid the fate of her beloved sister Julia, who died horribly and mysteriously with a warning on her lips: beware the Speckled Band. Holmes and I sat beside the window in our room at the Crown Inn, watching Stoke Moran through the trees. At about 9 o'clock, the light in Miss Stoner's room went out, and an hour or so later, the doctor's window went dark as well. At the stroke of 11, the lamp was lit again in Miss Stoner's room, shining through the unbarred window.
That's our signal. It comes from the middle window.
Moments later, we were on the dark road, a chill wind blowing in our faces, one light twinkling in front of us through the dark to guide us through the trees. We made our way through the wood, reached the lawn, crossed it, and were about to enter through the window when, from a clump of laurel bushes darted what I thought was a hideous and distorted child, who screamed and rushed past us with writhing limbs, disappearing into the darkness. Good God, man, did you see that?
What a nice household. That was the baboon.
There's a cheetah, too.
Probably curled up in a tree waiting to pounce on us. Come now, Watson, take off your shoes and follow me.
I confess I felt calmer after slipping off my shoes and following Holmes into the middle bedroom through the open window. Holmes noiselessly sealed the shutter, put the lamp on the table, and moved his eyes around the room. All was as it had been. He crept up to me and whispered in my ear so quietly I could barely hear.
Be silent. The smallest noise will be fatal to our plan. We must sit without light. He would see it through the ventilator. Do not fall asleep. Your life may depend on it. Have your pistol ready in case we need it. I'll sit on the side of the bed and you on the chair.
I took out my revolver and set it on the corner of the table in front of me. Holmes had brought a long, thin cane, and he placed it on the bed beside him. Then he set down a box of matches and a stump of candle. He gestured to me, and I extinguished the lamp, leaving us in darkness. How can I ever forget that dreadful vigil? I couldn't hear a sound, but knew my companion sat open-eyed within a few feet of me. The shutters left us in total darkness. There came the occasional cry of a night bird, and once, just outside the window, a long, drawn-out, cat-like growl that set my blood cold, the cheetah close at hand. From further away, we could hear the deep tolling of the village clock, measuring each quarter of an hour. 12 struck, then 1 and 2 and 3, and still we sat, waiting silently for what might be coming. Suddenly, there was a momentary gleam of light in the direction of the ventilator, which vanished immediately. Someone in the next room had lit a lantern. I heard the gentle sound of movement, and then all was silent again. For half an hour I sat with straining ears. Then suddenly there was another sound, a very gentle, soothing sound, like a small jet of steam escaping continuously from a kettle. The instant that we heard it, Holmes sprang from the bed, lit a match, and lashed out furiously at the bell pull with his cane.
Do you see it, Watson? Do you see it?
But I saw nothing. At the moment when Holmes struck the match, I heard a low, clear whistle, but the sudden glare in my weary eyes made it impossible to tell what it was at which my friend lashed so savagely. I could, however, see his face was deadly pale and filled with horror and loathing.
Ah, it's gotten away from me. Careful, Watson.
He ceased to strike and was gazing up at the ventilator when suddenly there broke from the silence of the night the most horrible scream I have ever heard. It swelled louder and louder, a hoarse yell of pain and fear and rage all mingled into one dreadful sound. They say that even as far away as the village that cry raised sleepers from their beds. I stood gazing at Holmes, and he at me, until the last echo of that awful scream died away in the silence from which it rose. My God, what can it mean?
That it is all over, and perhaps for the best. Take your pistol and we will enter Dr. Roylott's room.
With a grave face, he lit the lamp and led the way down the corridor. Twice he struck at the chamber door without any reply from within. Then he turned the handle and entered, I at his heels with the cocked pistol in my hand. On the table there stood a lantern with the shutter half open, throwing a beam of light at the iron safe, its door open. Beside the table, on the wooden chair, sat Dr. Grimesby Roylott, dressed in a long dressing gown. Across his lap lay the short leather lash with the looped end. His chin was angled upward, and his eyes were fixed in a dreadful, rigid stare on the corner of the ceiling. Around his forehead he had a strange yellow band decorated with brownish speckles, which seemed to be bound tightly round his head.
The band! The Speckled Band!
I took a step forward, and Dr. Roylott's strange headgear began to move, and, lifting from his hair, there appeared the diamond-shaped head and puffed-out neck of an evil-looking snake.
It's a swamp adder, the deadliest snake in India. Death within 10 seconds of being bitten. Ah, Watson, so violence does in truth recoil upon the violent, and the schemer falls into the pit he digs for another. Let us get this creature back to its den very, very carefully.
As he spoke, he drew the dog whip swiftly from the dead man's lap, and then, with lightning speed, he threw the noose around the reptile's neck, drew it from its horrible perch, and holding it at arm's length, he tossed it into the iron safe, slamming the door behind it. I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Then I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Helen in the doorway.
My God, that scream! What has happened to the doctor?
Please, madam, do not come in.
No, I must see. My God, his face, just like Julia's. What was it, doctor? What killed my sister?
A snake, my dear, a snake. Now I suggest we get you out of here and then notify the police of what has happened.
Such were the facts of the death of Dr. Grimesby Roylott of Stoke Moran. It is not necessary to tell how we conveyed Helen by morning train to the care of her good aunt at Harrow, or of how the official police inquiry concluded that the doctor had met his fate while playing carelessly with a dangerous pet. The next day, as Holmes and I returned to London by train, he explained those parts of the case which were still unclear to me.
My first idea in all this, my dear Watson, was utterly wrong. It shows how dangerous it is to work with insufficient data. The presence of the transients and Julia Stoner's use of the word band, with which she no doubt tried to explain the appearance of the thing that attacked her, put me entirely on the wrong track. The only thing I can say in my favor is that I instantly reconsidered my position when it became clear that no danger could have come into that room by the windows or door.
So, whatever killed her had to come from somewhere else.
And the only other point of access was the ventilator. Once I discovered that the bell rope hanging down over the bed was a dummy and that the bell was bolted to the floor, I had the instant suspicion that the rope was a bridge for something coming through the ventilator to the bed. A snake seemed likely, and we knew that the doctor had access to a supply of exotic creatures. The idea of using a form of poison unknown to local medical tests was just the idea a murderous doctor with Indian experience might have. The speed of the poison was also an advantage, and it would take a sharp-eyed coroner to distinguish the two little dark punctures showing where the poison fangs had done their work.
And the whistle?
Roylott had trained the snake to return at his whistle, probably using the milk we saw as bait. He would have put the snake through the ventilator after his stepdaughter fell asleep, certain that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. He had no guarantee the snake would bite on any given attempt, but given enough tries...
Good Lord. You mean to say that every time Julia Stoner heard that whistle on the nights before she died, that snake was in the bed with her?
Quite so. And in Helen's bed, the night before, she sought our help.
What an absolutely ghastly scheme.
And all for such a paltry sum of money. I had come to these conclusions before I even entered the doctor's room. An inspection of the chair in the corner told me he'd been standing on it, which would be necessary to reach the ventilator. The safe, the saucer of milk, and the looped lash dispelled any doubts that remained.
The metallic clang heard by Miss Stoner the night Julia died must have been her stepfather closing the door of his safe on the snake.
Yes, and so last night when I heard the creature hiss, I instantly lit the light and attacked it.
With the result of driving it back through the ventilator.
And also with the result of causing it to turn on its master on the other side. My blows with the cane roused its snakish temper, and it flew at the first person it saw. In this way, I am no doubt indirectly responsible for Mr. Grimesby Roylott's death.
Holmes, you mustn't think yourself responsible.
Oh, Watson, you misunderstand me. I doubt very much that the death of Dr. Grimesby Roylott will weigh heavily on my conscience.
And with that note of rough justice, we've come to the end of BeFM Drama's 5-part adaptation of The Adventure of the Speckled Band. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and it's been a pleasure bringing this story to air this week. I hope that you'll tune in on Sunday to catch the uninterrupted 1-hour compilation version of this story, which will be on air from 8 to 9 p.m. I also hope that you'll join us again next week here on BeFM Drama.